my great pleasure to have Jörg Lingens here. Jörg Lingens comes from the University of Münster, so we might have heard his presentation on Monday. Now, our connection with the University of Münster and the energy economist here is that we recently launched our Energy Transition Hub project. It's University of Melbourne, ANU, with collaboration also with IMIT, Murdoch University, and Monash University, and it's looking at economic opportunities of the energy transition. The University of Münster is on the German side, our key partner together with the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research and the Mercator Research Institute. So that collaboration over the next coming years is going to unfold, and Jörg is our first longer-term visitor here, and now presenting you with a view on the German hard coal phase-out, how the people are retrained into other positions or not. At your Monday seminar, there was a nice new twist. Normally, Germany is always seen as the lighthouse for the energy transition. Well, guess what? One of the key messages from Monday's seminar was that the way that smart meters work in Germany, that we distribute the smartphones they use the smartphones to take pictures of the old meters every now and then. And this is then the way to digitize the information from the old metering system. So Victoria is one of the best of the world's best smart metering rollout. Not yet to the full use, to the extent that it could be used, but in that sense, really, Victoria is leading way ahead of Germany. Therefore, multiple reasons the smart meter rollout has happened. So maybe there's another message today in the hard coal phase out. Could be. Germany is not the lighthouse. We don't know. Thank you very much. Enjoy. Thank you so much for your challenging. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Yeah. Today I'm going to talk about a very recent project that I've been doing with three colleagues of mine, Jörg and Markus from the Unemployment Agency, and Nicolas from the Mercator Center for Climate Change, who's also, or they are also collaborating in this in the Energy Hub. And we were really interested in basically the economic consequences of the hard coal phase out in Germany, because basically we know that, I mean, if we want really to meet climate goals, we need to refrain from burning this fossil fuel, and especially we should stop burning coal. But we also know that most governments do not really like to take this road and do not like to take action. And we think there are at least two reasons for that. First of all, the whole electricity infrastructure is based around coal-fired power plants. This is, however, not today's topic. And the other one is that in many regions, or many countries rely heavily on the, say, value-added benefits, the economic benefits of mining coal. This is basically today's topic. And what we want to know is, what would we expect if a country, a region, phases out, so stops basically to mine coal, and what would we expect are the consequences, especially for people that are employed in this sector, but also for other people, say, employed in the surrounding industry or in the surrounding sectors. Okay, and we use basically the situation in Germany as a kind of event study to analyze this question. Why is that? Well, if we look at the hard coal production in Germany, then you see that it's steadily declining, right? Starting from the say peak in the 70s up to now. The last coal mine will close down at the end of 2018. So over the course of, say, 60 years, we just phased completely out of producing coal. I mean, the electricity system is still using imported coal, but we do not mine coal anymore. And we were wondering, okay, if we have this event study, then we should be able to gain some insight somehow how this would at least economically affect people that have been working in this industry. Okay, so what is the problem? What's the reason why we observe this situation in Germany? Well, as you might know, coal mining in Germany is very, very expensive. Why is that? Well, they use underground mining. So basically they dig a hole 1 kilometer deep under the surface and try to mine this coal. And with a deep economic integration in the world market, especially during the 60s, the German mining industry faced strong competition from overseas imports, especially from Australia, obviously, from South Africa and South America. And these imports were pushing the German coal production basically out of the market. Why? Well, because the cost of mining coal in Germany is up to 3 times the world market price. So no coal-fired power plant would buy German coal, right? Because it's too expensive. So there was something to be done. Okay, and politicians were very aware that that something has to be done to say to lighten somehow the burden of this competition, because on the one hand, coal mining is very, very heavily concentrated in a very, very small area, the Ruhr area in Western Germany, which is 4,500 square kilometers, which is very, very small. Okay, imagine Melbourne is double the size. Okay, it's a very, very tiny region where basically all of the or most of the coal mining took place. And at that time, 400,000 employees were affected by this competition. So basically, to avoid somehow nowadays one would say a Detroit moment, economic policy tried to do something against the decline of this industry. And the idea was very simple. Okay, look, if coal mining is too expensive, then let's subsidize coal mining. And basically what they did is the government tried or moderated somehow a contract between the coal mining industry on the one hand and the coal-fired power plant owners, or the firms that generate electricity by using coal by burning coal, and they call it the century contract because it seemed to be so important that it would be the main topic for the next 100 years. And what they did is basically the power plants just committed themselves to at least to a large extent to use German coal, okay, and to pay the higher price, they were basically allowed to increase electricity prices, for consumers. So consumers basically paid more for the electricity, and the revenue was used to subsidize the mining industry. Okay, and this subsidy scheme, which basically with some changes went from 75 till and will phase out in at the end of next year, as I said. This subsidy scheme was huge, right? We had during 75 and 2002 just alone expenditures of 100 billion euros in 2002 prices. Okay, so inflation adjusted. Okay, and the coal subsidy was always the highest, or the subsidy that ranked highest in all the subsidies paid by the federal government. Fun fact somehow is in 2016 it was 2.2 billion euros, which made it second place in the ranking of all subsidies. First place was to subsidize home renovations to keep them climate neutral. okay, which was 1.5 billion euros. So yeah, there's somehow a cognitive dissonance, maybe, if you look at it. And there was also a lot of tension between the different regional governments, because all consumers had to pay the higher electricity price. So all consumers had to pay the subsidy, but it obviously benefited only the very, very small region in the west of Germany. Okay. So what happened? Well, the number of employees still declined. Okay, still we're phasing out of mining coal, but at the beginning of the subsidy scheme, the decrease slowed down. Okay, we had some basically a very steep decrease since the late 50s or beginning 60s, so when the world market integration took place, and then it slowed down when the subsidy scheme was implemented. Okay, the number of mining companies also decreased. This is basically due to the fact that we have that mining is characterized by economies of scale. So larger production entities are basically more efficient, and when competitive pressure increases on an industry, it's not very uncommon that there will be more mergers. Some smaller companies leave the market, so that the number of remaining mining companies, so the most efficient ones, stay in the market, and this is this is the explanation basically for that. Now we have still 2 mining companies left. So we have 2 open coal mines left, and we used to have around 170. Okay, at the mid 50s. When we look at people that do their apprenticeship in the mining industry, we see that also we have a decline. Okay, people anticipating it's a declining industry, so you do not want to invest your human capital into this declining industry. But then somehow there's the government that implements a subsidy scheme, so it may be again be more attractive to invest your human capital into this industry, which might explain this peaking of the number of apprentices in during the 80s. But then again, people were somehow aware that it's not, it's an industry that is only still alive due to this subsidy. So people just stopped becoming apprentices there. Although even in 2009, and people knew that there was definitely a stop on coal mining by the end of 2018, there were still people applying for apprenticeship in these industries. Although these people, I mean, they are 16, 17, 18, 19, so they have to work at least for another 50 years. So they become coal miners, but knowing that in, say, 8 or 10 years time, it's clear that there's no jobs left. And why do people do that? Well, there's some anecdotal evidence because one of the last coal mines is in a neighboring city where I live, and they ask people why they are still doing their apprenticeship there, and I said, well, it's a family tradition. We have to keep the spirit alive, although knowing that it will definitely stop. That the mine is closing down at the 31st of December 2018. It's definitely closing down. They still said, well, we have to be there. Okay, so what are the facts? The number of employees declined in this industry. The number of mining companies declined. The number of apprentices declined. So we have basically a set of people that have worked in this industry and that experienced these economic consequences of these mine closures and these of this structural change. And what we would like to do is to use this this event study of the decline in the mining industry, buffered by the subsidy program, to get an understanding of what happens to people that used to work as in the coal mining industry, for example, as coal miners, that are affected by the structural change. And we would like to basically to follow them through their employment career. Okay, so we would like to know, do they find new jobs easily? Do they face long periods of unemployment? Do they face long unemployment spells? What is the wage effect? What is the income effect? And wouldn't it be great to have data about how people move basically through their career? That would be awesome. And the good thing is that we do have this data, and the reason why we have this data is that the labor market in Germany is, or that the organization of the labor market in Germany is very specific. Basically, the thing is, if you have a regular job in Germany, then you are part of a social security system, right? So if you work a standard job, you have to pay. You are covered by a health insurance, so you have to pay your health insurance. You are covered by an unemployment insurance, so you have to pay your unemployment insurance, and you have to pay, or you have to contribute to a pension system. Okay, there are some exceptions, but basically, if you have a job that earns you more than 450 euros per month, which many jobs do, you are part of this system. Okay, and if you are part of this system, there's an administration, right? The administration that administers the health insurance, the unemployment insurance, and the pension system, that collects data on you. Okay, and specifically concerning the unemployment insurance system, the unemployment agency collects data on individuals, and what they collect is basically the spell data, so they know when and where you work, and they follow you through your career. Okay, and luckily we are able to use this data, and this is the reason why there are two guys from the unemployment agency are into this project. So the good thing is that this data is very reliable, because it is really used for administrative purposes, because it is used, for example, to calculate the payments that you get once you are unemployed. And basically what the what the unemployment agency does, it collects all this data, and it collects, for example, information about the beginning of an employment spell or an unemployment spell of a specific person. It knows the end of these spells. It knows the daily wage, because this is used to calculate the how much you would get in case you are unemployed, in case the unemployment insurance system pays you something. We know demographic information, so for example, education and age and gender, and we know the occupation in a very detailed manner, and we have regional and sectoral information. Okay, and you can get this data. This is maybe if you are interested in that. The most recent version is a 2% random sample from the basically galaxy of all employees for all spells between 75 and 2010, and you can get it as a scientific use file, which is very neat. And this scientific use file basically consists of the whole data. So Now I'm not sure whether this refers to the use file or the whole data, but what I think it's the use file. What we have is 1.5 million spells. So a spell is basically a situation where we an entry in a spreadsheet where we know what this person did when they started to work, where they work, when they stopped to work, when they changed their establishment, when they changed their occupation and all that. And what we have is we have 300,000 to 600,000 people that we follow. So obviously, since we have basically a panel of people, we have more spells than people. So, for example, you start your career at the age of say 16 in firm Y, then you would for every year generate a spell for your person in this firm. So the firm has to give this information every year to the unemployment agency. If you change the firm or if you become unemployed, then there's again the notification to the unemployment agency. So again, you have more spells than people. You could also use the entire data set, but this is, I guess, only possible if you visit Nuremberg, where the unemployment agency is. Okay, so I talked a bit about the data because it's important to explain basically what we are doing. Using this data, we are able to identify individuals, okay, and we are able to identify individuals that work in the coal mining industry. Okay, this is what we know. We know where they work in the coal mining industry, and we know their job, their occupation they have in the coal mining industry. Okay, so what we know is we can identify these people, and once we could identify those people that are affected by a closing down of the coal mine, we could just follow these individuals, okay, through the data, through time, and see what happened to them after they experienced this layoff spell, basically. So to identify these individuals that are really affected by the layoff, there are basically two possibilities. Okay, the one is since we have very, very detailed information from different sources, which mines closed down, where they are located, we could use this information, the yearly information and the regional information, to identify those individuals working in the industry, working in the mining industry, that were affected by a closing down of a coal mine. This is a bit complicated, and since this is the first step, we use a different approach. And the different approach is very simple. The unemployment agency offers, using this data, an algorithm that just identifies basically mass layoffs in an industry. Okay, so what this algorithm does is it looks at changes in the spells within a specific industry and within a specific region, and once specific thresholds are reached somehow, this algorithm says, okay, look, we have a mass layoff in this industry in this region, and what we use is this information, okay, to identify those individuals that have been affected by a mass layoff in the coal mining, in the hard coal mining industry, to be precise, and we try to look what happened to them. Okay. Basically, we focus on two things. First of all, we focus on employment effects. Okay, and second, we focus on wage effects. First of all, employment effects. Okay, what we can do is, or what we identify is, we're identifying around 1,400 people working in the mining industry and being affected by a mass layoff during the period from 75 to 2010. And we identify those individuals after the layoff, so they turn up again in this data. And so what we see is there's a difference, obviously. So 82 individuals just disappear. So why would they disappear? Usually these people disappear because they just, they just retire from working, and once you retire, you are not anymore in the data. And what we see in addition, that which somehow is fascinating, that only 3.5% of all these people that remained in the labor market experienced an unemployment spell after the layoff. So basically, the majority of all laid off workers in the coal mining industry just instantaneously found a new job. Okay, after their spell, after there was a closing down of the mine, they just, next spell, next month, I lose my job. In May and in June, I start again and start working. Okay, and the reason is, at least we think that this is the reason, because when we look where these people end up, we know that those individuals that we identify, 60% of them is, maybe this is a misnomer, they are real blue collar workers. So these are really people that work, that mine the coal. And from those workers who find a job, basically the same number remain to be miners. Okay, so what we think is happening there, or what we observe, is because the industry is so concentrated on such a small in such a small region, there are people that, when one mine is closing down, they just move to the next mine and work there again as a coal miner. And why would that be possible? Well, remember, there's this huge subsidy scheme. Okay, so there are still mines producing, so you just go to basically to the next mine and work there as a coal miner. So basically, there's no, at least in the data we have, is we do not find any retraining. We do not find basically any occupational change, and this is also reflected in the fact that they do not only keep or most of them do not only keep their occupation, but also most of them stay in the same industry. Okay, so there's no, people get laid off, but they still use the same human capital and work basically in the same industry and still work as a coal miner. And it's basically more or less no effects of this phase out on the unemployment experience of these workers. And why we think this is the case, we will discuss this in a minute. Before we come to that, let me briefly tell you something about wages. I told you that we do not only observe the employment state, so whether you're employed or unemployed, but we also know the daily wage. Okay, so what we did is we identified those individuals that are affected by the layoff due to a shutdown of the coal mine. At least this is our interpretation, because again, we use the algorithm. So basically, it's only what we identify as a mass layoff in the region, in the hard coal mining industry. But I mean, I think it's fair enough to identify this as being a closing down of a mine in the certain region. Okay, and what we did is we compared the daily wage of those people that were affected by a layoff, basically before they were being laid off, and when they first got the new employment spell. So as I told you, most of these guys just instantaneously find a job, but we also look at those people that did not find instantaneously a job, but who found somewhere in the future a new job. We focus on full-time employees. And what we find is that the average wage of all these people, when you compare pre-layoff and first new employment spell increases by around 3%, okay? But that the wage distribution, so if you look at all the wage changes, is has a very long left tail, meaning that we observe more wage decreases or more small wage increases than large wage increases. But still, what we find is that the wage increases for after being laid off, or when you compare the pre and post employment spells. Okay, what we did additionally, we divided this subsample of people. These are all guys. You know, these are all people that that were being laid off, that found a new job in their first employment spell. What we did next is we split this sample into two subsamples. First of all, people that that changed their occupation, and those who did not. Okay, people that changed their occupation, their wage increased by 7%. Okay, and these are people that either retrained or found somewhere a new job in a new occupation. And for those who stick basically to their occupation, we also find wage increases on average by 4.5%. However, there's a huge variance, a huge variety basically in these individual wage increases, because the number of observations, remember, people that change their occupation, there are only very few people that do that. Okay, and we would like to interpret this somehow as, well, it's a self-selection effect. So people who have have better job prospects somewhere else, they just leave the sample. So we have it's not a random decision of changing your occupation, but you know, those people who change their occupation and those who don't, they are structurally different. Okay, and we didn't control for any of these differences. Okay, and the last thing we did is we looked at people who changed the sector. So we just ignored the occupational thing. We just looked at the sector effects. So people who do not work in the coal mining industry in their first new employment spell, okay, and their wage decreases by 4.5%. Okay, so we would think that, yeah, well, this is some kind of a loss of specific skills that might contribute to this effect, but maybe there are also selection effects that are part of the story. We are not sure. As I told you, it's very preliminary, and we didn't run really fancy econometrics. We just did some descriptive studies. But again, the variation is very large. So we thought that this is somewhat puzzling. At least we didn't expect that this would that we would get these results, because basically what I'm saying, or we are saying, is, look, the coal phase out had basically no effects on employment and only small but positive wage effects. And the explanation is, I mean, this is obvious, right? Is the subsidy program paid by the government? So you would think, well, okay, they have been subsidized, and you know, a subsidy might be a problem or not. But if this is the case, there shouldn't be no real effects from this mining industry. You know, it's just there are costs, but these are totally buffered by somebody, and everything's fine. The puzzling fact is somehow that although the people that worked in the industry are basically not affected, that the region where coal was mined, so the western part of Germany, this tiny western part of Germany, has the worst economic performance compared to any Western region by basically any metric that you would like to use. So we have highest per capita budget deficit. We have highest unemployment rate. We have lowest educational achievements. We have a high school dropout rate of around 10%. We have unemployment rates of around 15%. Compare that to the southwestern industrial core, where the cars are produced. Basically, they have only an unemployment rate of 1.5%, and basically the high school dropout rate is more or less, well, it's not exactly zero, but you know, it's not very, it's observationally equivalent to zero. So what we think is, well, what is going on here? So it's not basically the phase out or the problem or the cost of this phase out is not carried by those who had a job there, but is basically carried by individuals that just enter the labor market in these regions when the industry is in decline. And this makes strong, significant, or has strong and significant economic consequences, which is somehow bad because there's no equal sharing of the burden between these adjustment processes. And we know that from a literature that analyzes how bad luck basically graduating when the labor market is just in a recession, which effects that has on your career, that this has very strong effects that are long lasting. Wages are lower, you got more health problems, medical conditions, mortality is higher, and all that. And what we basically would like to do, we would like to identify those individuals in these regions where we had this mass layoffs when they just graduated or entered the industry. Okay, we can observe these individuals. We see who entered the labor market or who just graduated and became unemployed. And what we would like to do is we would like to compare the economic performance or the economic well-being of these people to those that are maybe not affected by the layoff, or we would like to understand how basically the distance to these layoff centers, regional layoff centers, how this contributes to your economic career, such that we can understand how strong are, for example, spillover effects on different regions. Unfortunately, we haven't done this yet because we just started this project in I think in May. So let me sum up. We have a phase of basically a forced hard coal phase out. Okay, due to international competition. Employment decreased basically from 200,000 people to zero within 50 years. The effect on the incumbent workforce is basically zero due to the subsidy program, but would like to know who basically is affected, who is economically affected. And it seems to be that individuals that just enter the labor market are the ones who carry the burden. And I think, or we think this is important, not only because it demonstrates somehow in maybe also in different countries what a phase out would with the consequences of a phase out, but also in Germany, as you might know, we have a brown coal production, which is somehow well and alive, but there are discussions. We have a general election in 3 weeks. And after that, I think there will be discussions whether we should stop mining, whether we should stop mining brown coal. And I think this could be, or this information or this research could add to our understanding of what we would expect in this situation. So thank you so much. This is what I had to say. Thank you.
Looking at Germany, the government put a huge amount of money into enough that the incumbent workers doesn't work so well. Given the regional effects that happen anyway, do you ever see a government transitioning industry, the mining industry, without such heavy subsidies?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think maybe it's also okay to pay these subsidies, but the question is whether the way it has been done, at least in Germany, just to unconditionally give money to this industry, whether this is a good idea. And I think it's not, because you pay all of these guys a huge amount of money. You do not retrain them, and basically the ones that enter the labor market, who they do not have any it's not their fault. They have to carry the burden. I think this is not fair, but I mean, sure, the government wants to subsidize these workers, right? This is
Thank you. I'm interested in the labour mobility in Germany. I know in the States that I've seen studies, labour mobility has gone down a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether people used to just expect that the unemployed may just move states, and that was something big. Maybe it doesn't happen as much. What's the situation in Germany? Do people expect that they're going to have to move?
Yeah, no, they don't. They don't. They just basically stay where they are. I mean, on average. Yeah, it's. I mean, I think the situation is. I mean, I know these studies from the US where the labor mobility decreased a lot and is much lower than people would expect. But I think the same applies to Germany. People wouldn't really move, let's say, too far away from where they were born, where they were raised, because there are cultural differences. You wouldn't like to, for example, a coal miner from the West, you wouldn't like to move to Bavaria to produce cars, because it's tension, and you wouldn't do that. So
previous two questioners were here from the colleges and the best right years. But please introduce yourself briefly with name and affiliation.
Stuart, just Master of Environment. I'm a little confused by the data. Are you saying that of the people that were trenched, 85% of those ended up being employed in the college? Because that seems like inconsistent with 200,000 going down to zero in the space of a lot of natural attrition.
Yeah, they just retire out of the labor force somehow, and these we do not observe anymore. We have just this very specific sample of people who are in the data, right? So they are not. They just this. I think all of the decrease that we are seeing there is not by people just moving from being a coal miner into unemployment, but being a coal miner and then just retire at some point in your career. I mean, this is what we found in the data, but I mean, still I agree, but that needs to be closer examined. That's obviously true. Well, there was an implicit contract, or I mean, there's a contract on such a high level. It's a question whether you would call it explicit or implicit, because there's no real enforcement mechanism. But there was this contract between the electricity producers that run their coal-fired power plants and the mining industry, that they would buy the coal, the German coal, at the going price, well, at the cost covering price, and to generate this, or to make up this higher input price, they were allowed to charge higher electricity price. So basically, it's a somehow a production subsidy, but you know, there's the contract ran for 10 years, and then there was bargaining over how much they would have to use from this, or how much they would have to commit to the amount of German coal that they had to use in the production process, and blah blah blah. And there was a huge discussion around that. But basically, it's a production subsidy.
I guess what I want to get to is that there's not an explicit
No, I don't think so. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is this rate of plan in place roughly a third of the rate point?
Mm-hmm.
Three different categories were sort of very explicit.
Yeah.
Whereas here it seems like it's almost naturally occurred that they've just automatically been read.
Yeah, well, there's a strong union movement, right? Okay, so there's on this level, there's no reemployment guarantee or something like that, but everybody knew or anticipated that the union would bargain in the closing down of a mine for these reemployment probability, or raising these reemployment issues. Yeah.
My question would be the skilled tradesmen within the unemployed.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of proportion of skilled? Like a distinction between like figure and turner as opposed to a colliery worker. So the skilled tradesmen moving into another field, basically, have any sort of data around percentages of those within the makeup of the unemployed. So when they lay people off.
Yeah. I see what. Yeah.
Skill in
Yeah.
Can go to
I do not have. I mean, we in principle we have this information, but we didn't look at, because the amount of people who just at least in this data got unemployed is so tiny that we just said, okay, well, we do not.
I would have thought it's the transition needs to the skill set as opposed to ones that actually.
Yeah, well, but when we're talking about let me see. The 60% of the real blue collar workers, these are occupations that are people really mining coal. So it's not an engineer or not a. Well, isn't the miner a coal worker by definition? Okay, then the word is wrong. So these are people who really mine these are not people who work, for example, in the back office, or engineers, or people doing the accounting thing, or that, or trading coal, or whatever they do, or reproducing the coal that is coming out of the ground. The 60% of these people who remain they are really those people who are really coal miners.
Yes. Yes, my name is Jonathan. I'm a historian. I'm quite interested in terms of. I think what you've outlined, and for what I've been here, it's great that German government is actually, engaging in providing some kind of security for the workers that are phased out. But I'm just wondering, how can that be extrapolated or expanded on a world scale? And in terms, because when we are changing to a more ecologically sustainable economies, and it seems to me that the kind of paradigm that's being used, which is a paradigm of capitalism, is limited. Like Thomas Kuhn or Imre Lakatos, philosophers of science, have pointed out, this is a very obsolete way of organizing world society, because you still have, for instance, here in Australia, we've got this huge, gigantic Adani coal mine, which could possibly come into being, right? All I'm saying is, it's great what the German government is doing, but how does one expand this and make it such that we are talking about ecologically sustainable society?
That's an awesome question. I don't know. I don't know how. I mean, the thing is, I think we in my opinion, you can maybe learn two things out of this research. First of all, how not to help the incumbent workforce, because you basically pay them money and do nothing. I mean, it seems not to be the greatest plan of all that you could think of. And second, but this is, as I said, future research, how large would be the consequences for the region when you shut down this mining industry. I think these could be used. I mean, to somehow maybe to get a feeling or impression what would happen if you close down these mines. I mean, I think it's I mean, to be clear, it's not that Germany stopped using coal, right? It's not kind of the great ecological movement phasing out of coal. It's only phasing out of producing coal, not of using it. I mean, the electricity system just relies on imported coal. So, but still, I mean, we have to. I mean, people live in these regions all around the world. They mine coal, and we have to figure out how to, what to do with these people when we tell them, okay, look, we have to close down your mine, so you will lose your job. What will happen then? You have to provide an answer. If you don't do that, then people, I mean, you see that what happens in the States, then these people vote for some, funny people somehow. I mean, you have to provide them with something. And what we are trying to understand is, okay, with how large would be the economic consequence for these people, and with what could be the answer that we give to these people.
Interesting. Two last questions here, and then in the back, and there's time afterwards to ask more. So,
thank you. Actually, what you said is a nice segue to what I want to ask. I think there's some really interesting cautionary tales in your research here, because of course the subsidies were never originally intended to be part of a just transition. But we're here. All of us here are interested in just transition and what we learn here. And I think we need to bring the politics in too, because we're talking about concentrated industries with regional dependencies.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting about the finding is that you had concentrated winners and diffuse losers within the region, right?
Yeah, true.
You get unemployment all the time because it's diffuse. Politicians don't care about it. It's not popping up in particular electorates or states. When you have a regionally concentrated industry in particular states in America, whether they're liberal, they're Democrat or conservative, they'll vote for Paul, right? So I think if we're really have to be careful about planning a just transition, because there's also other dependent businesses that have, kind of a reverse multiplier effect that's going to occur for them. So we need to think about the direct and the indirect economic consequences, and the diffuse and the concentrated employment consequences. So it's kind of, I think, brought out the sharp relief the many more things you need to think about when you're trying to plan for just transition. Because unemployment happens all the time, but most people aren't looked after. It's only when it's concentrated. But here, what's really interesting is that those that seem to lose are those with employment in the region who aren't in that industry.
Yeah.
So it seems that the jobs were sucked up by those coming out. And if you look in the Latrobe Valley, I mean, some of the interviews that my honour students have done down there is that the coal workers, the miners, the privileged workers in the community,
Yeah,
and they're going to be looked after. It's
Yeah.
the rest that are going to
yeah,
suffer.
yeah, yeah.
And I
Same,
think that's a really
same,
good
same here.
point.
Yeah, same here. Yeah,
Yeah.
same here. Same here. I mean, yeah. Thank you.
You also have a look at the production of the foods over the last 50 years.
I mean, well, it's since the data is just worker focused, employment focused, we do not have that. I mean, the only information we have is from officials from the statistical office, from Statistics Germany, and there's a number of employed. What we had this is production. The mining production in million metric tons.
It's partly due to the phasing out of the coal production.
Mhm.
Another important reason is we are using more and more machines rather than labor, so it's less labor intensive. That's another
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah.
Probably
But we are not after explaining what happens, why this happens, but more what happens. I mean, in with an economic focus, what happens individually with these people? Where do they go? What do they do when they are laid off? And what happens to people who do not find a job anymore in this privileged industry? So we're not after explaining this. So thank you.
So we close here, but
Thank you.
before thanking Jörg another time, two announcements. Next Wednesday, there's climate change in the age of Trump, hosted by the Faculty of Arts. I think look on our website and see the event there advertised as well. That's next Wednesday, 30th of August, 6:30, I think. And we have a number of interesting events coming up in September or October. They're not yet on our website, but sign up to the newsletter. Our new seminar space here, and this was our first seminar, has been put up with a number of students putting in a lot of work, and maybe we just give them a round of applause for the experience. One very happy student did all sorts of engineering here in the background. For example, that engineering allows us as well to have in the future, when this event space might be filled out, you don't get an Eventbrite registration anymore, you can sign up to the webinar, and on either your smartphone or your computer, etc., you can see these events live. You can even here raise your hand, etc. In the future, we enable that feature. So our events in this space here are going to be live in the future, thanks to the great magicians in the background. And that leaves me now to thank again Jörg for coming out here. He spends another week with us, and then before heading home into the
Winter.
chilly autumn and winter in Germany. Thank you so much.
Thank you for questions and comments. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.